Welcome to Teaching History with Professor Bob, the elementary edition. Although this one could be middle school and it could be high school, because actually the game that I'm going to talk about I used when I was in high school. When I taught high school, Western said it was an all-year course. So at semester, which was after Christmas time, we began one section. So we always had a couple of days just before Christmas vacation, which are, for any teacher, just hell. Now they usually fill that with finals. It's taken away that extra time. But trying to teach at that moment is usually pretty difficult. So we had usually finished the Roman Empire at that time, and I used those 2 days to allow for some extra credit exercises. We played 2 games. We played a gladiator simulation, which certainly is unsuitable for the elementary age, and we did a chariot race series. Now, we very rarely did the chariot race. I think we only did it on 2 years because it took up such a vast space and it was a little bit time consuming. But it makes for a great game if you want to try it with your kids, or for that matter, with older students. I actually gave the rules to my colleagues after I left teaching at Park Hill High School, the different variations of it and what you can do. I'm going to give you in the down below in the description, I'll give you the rules. Very simplified version, I might add. And if you happen to be interested in a copy of a little newspaper I made, just send me a note with your email and I'll email you a copy. Not very good condition, but it might be of interest to you. So, here's what we did. What you see in front of you here, and I'll show you larger pictures of them later, are different styles of chariots that you can actually buy. Now, when I taught in high school, which is the only time I've actually used the game, we used these figures. These are lead figures, 25 millimeter. They weren't very expensive in those days. You can't even find them nowadays. But this is an Assyrian 4-horse chariot, and then there is my Egyptian 2-horse chariot. Well, it's unfair to race them together, but we didn't worry about that. We just needed pieces of equipment. You can also get them like this. This is a 54 millimeter. This is a replica of a Ben-Hur chariot race game that was made by Mark's Toys in the 50s. There is a company called the Toy Soldier Company that still sells a version of it. And I will show you pictures of it at the end, showing you if you would like to try and find it. I'm not sure they're still available, but they do actually come with a little stadium. And the box is marked Gladiators. And then this is what I'm going to be talking about using, because the reason I'm doing this is I decided, as I've been teaching my granddaughter, the 7-year-old, Emma, that when we got to Rome, we needed to have something fun to do, and she likes to play games. So I decided to bring the chariot race game out and see what we could do. Now, if she were here in Kansas City, it would have been simple. We could have used the old one, but that's, even though it's too large, it was probably better that I made a smaller version so that I could ship it to her in Denver at this point. So I'm going to talk about the rules for both games, and then I'm going to show you the setup for them and how it works. I was going to do the video running the game. That proved to be awful. So I'm going to use still pictures and talk over them like I do in a Camtasia program. But and then also you'll see at the end the companies that you can purchase. Now, I painted all the chariots this time. I did leave one chariot unpainted, so if Emma wants to paint one, she can paint one. The one thing about the venue is that you can use it for, if you wanted to do a Greek Olympics and have running events, you could use that. It is a stadium, or stadii. And I've also added for Emma, not a horse race game, war elephant races. So I painted up some war elephants as well, which you'll see when we get along. So let me explain how this works. Now, in the high school, it worked like this. I usually had 30 students. Almost always had 30 students. Well, we made 4 racing factions. In ancient Rome, the favorite racing factions were red, green, blue, and yellow. I divided the class in the red, green, blue, and yellow. The 2 extra people, they filled in whenever if somebody were absent on that day or I needed assistance. The winning team received 10 extra credit points each for the end of the semester. And you had to participate. Otherwise, you had to do work. But that was never a problem. The problem was they never wanted to quit. They kept wanting me to bring it back out when we didn't have anything to do or we had time to kill. So it was a little problematic. So I divided them into teams, and you got points for first, second, third, fourth. And we raced 8 chariots at a time. And so you'd have 2 from each of the factions. Originally, we thought we'd do 7 laps. That proved to be unusable, way too long. So we did 2 laps, and we used 1 single dice for the rolling. I made a set of rules that was very complicated. For example, you had to roll the dice to see how many lanes you could change each turn. If you ran into somebody, then you had to roll dice to see whether you had a horse injured or a wheel fell off or something like that. If you ran up against someone who had a spinner hubcap that could cut your spokes, how many spokes you would lose. That in the tryout was a total failure because it took way too long. It just needed to be simple. So we simplified the rules. So for example, you would draw, now in this case, we had 8 lanes. So there would only be 8 cards. You would simply draw a card. Whatever number it was, that was your lane. Lane 1 is the best, lane 8 is the worst because the start is on a curve. So you have to go a lot further from one end of it to the other. So you would draw your card. In Emma's case, they have Roman numerals on one side and Arabic numerals on the other. So she can learn Roman numerals at the same time. Then the emperor, there's an emperor's box, as you will see when I show you the pictures of the set. The emperor's box, well, the emperor has favorites. Nero, for example, loved green. And one time he dyed the sand in the Circus Maximus green. And so there is an anti-cheating device. There's a white line, a white rope which runs from the spine to the emperor's box, which can also be the box for the person putting on the games. It could be a politician. That rope stays up to the very last second, so the charioteers never exactly know if that's going to stay up and they're going to trip their horses or not. So it really kind of paid to try and figure out who the emperor liked. So in this game, the emperor, and Emma's going to be using 6 chariots. So there are 6 colors, red, green, blue, and yellow. And then there is an orange, which is her favorite color, and black. So what you do is you just take one of those cards, shuffle them, set it by the emperor's box. When the horses get into the straightaway, you turn the number over. It says orange. Oh, we drop the rope, we pull the rope off the line because we don't want to go through the tripping. That's just way too complicated. So what this does is it gives the orange team one more space right off the bat. So that gives them a little bit of an advantage. Not a great one, but a little bit of one. After that, everything is simply dice. It's all chance. So once you've drawn your lane assignments, when it's time to go first, you throw 1 dice. It says 2. You move 2 lanes of your choice. The next one, the next one, the next one, the next one. Once everybody has kind of stretched out, then the person in front rolls next, the person next, and so on and so on. If you have 2 chariots that are at the same distance, roll 1 dice each. The highest dice goes first. You roll that. And then you just make 2 laps around the venue. Now, in the Roman games, they always had twice as many horses that could fit in a straightaway. The object was to see who would charge into it, who would lay back. And frequently they have these massive wrecks. As a matter of fact, the first time they filmed the original Ben-Hur in black and white, they offered $1,000 to the stuntman who could win the race. And this precipitated a gigantic pileup in the first straightaway, killed a couple of horses, and I believe killed one of the drivers. So they changed it. If you look at the color version with Charlton Heston in it, you notice they take a lap around and stop right in front of the Emperor. And then they start and then go into the first curve and so forth and so on. So that's cut out. So there are 4 lanes in the game. There are 6 sets of horses. So you have to jockey for position. So that's how you kind of start. Where you get into a little bit of trouble is if you're behind somebody and there's no room to maneuver. Normally you would just say there's a crash. And we really don't want to do that at this simple level. You would just not get a turn. If you couldn't go sideways, you certainly cannot go backwards. So you would just not get a turn. It's very simple. You can do a lot of things. If you have art projects, you could do the art projects of making the game. I actually made up a little template that if you wanted that, so it's made out of, what I used for the set for Emma is heavy poster board. But anyway, I could probably give you a scanned copy of it or something, somehow. If you really wanted something, we could do that. You could just simply take a picture, a screenshot off of the game and determine how you want to do it. It's basically the elementary game for Emma is half size to that of the original. The original was 88 inches long. This one is 44 inches long. And the widths are only about an inch different. I think they're 22 for the new game and 23 for the old game. And because I'm sending it off to her, I had to cut those into parts so they could be mailed easily. The high school game was actually multiple large sheets of poster board, and you could just laminate them, which I did, and then put them in the position. So you can have them paint their vehicles, you can have them paint their creatures, their characters, you can make a character just like them. You can make a stand. I'm going to show you some of the things that I experimented with. You could use Legos. You could use other things. I happen to have a huge box of castle blocks. The Aaron Castillo castle blocks made in Spain. I guess I bought them in the 80s to do something with it with one of the children when they were little. But I had enough to make a Circus Maximus out of it. Then I checked online how expensive they are. For a third of what I used, they wanted $450. So castle blocks are really expensive. So Legos would work well. And it's something you can put up real quick. You just roll your dice, move around, and you do get an idea of the game. Now, in the case of Emma, we would not play the game until I talked about, or we did a lesson on the chariot racing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set up the games and take some pictures, and then I will explain the different types of the games. And then when I'm finished, I will show pictures of where I purchased all of the equipment, give you an idea what the price was. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would have been. The most difficult, oddly enough, I used to paint miniature figures. You can probably see some of them on the shelves behind me. I have lots of Napoleonic miniatures. I had always used Testors paint. Well, now Testors only gives you 1/3 of an ounce of paint, and it's outrageously expensive. So I bought primer, a flat matte primer of white at the hardware store, and just sprayed everything with the primer. And then I ordered a set of specialized paints and brushes for people who do miniature figures all the time. And it really wasn't that expensive, and I got a nice selection. So anyway, Let's go ahead and look how the game works. Here's a little introductory slide I always use when I make one of these projects, and I've listed it as volume 2, even though we haven't gotten to Rome, but it is the second one of these elementary editions that I have done. And for those of you who haven't gotten a good view of my granddaughter Emma, there she is in the upper left and right hand corners in her goddess outfit for the Greek unit. I bought her a little toga outfit for Rome, but we haven't gotten that far, so that's why she has the Greek outfit on. And then there's some pictures that I'll be talking about as we get into the rest of the show. 5 of them, I believe, in the whole set. And you see the spine in the middle, the darkened area. The racing area starts on the right-hand side and then heads towards the Emperor's box, which you see there. And there would be that says a starting line piece. But you can see how large this is. I've added 2 extra leaves. I could have put another leaf on this table. You put 8 high school students around here and their friends. It gets pretty loud and pretty wild at some point. That creature you see in the left-hand corner of the screen is our dog. We have 5 cats, and we have 1 dog. That's Alex, half Pyrenees, half lab mix, and he is, as you can see, unimpressed. Here's a couple of other views. Here's a view coming down the straightaway, and you can see the little white line that I've laid across there, the Alba Linea. And you have 2 lead chariots running in front of the Emperor, and you'll see some little figures around there. There are 4 pedestrians that move across. They have their own separate role, the number of spaces, and they're just obstacles that you're supposed to avoid. And then this other picture shows the chariots getting ready to go into the turns. And usually the way it works is there's 3 going around at the first level, 6, then I think there's 8, and then there's 10 that go around. So it really, you want to stay on the inside part of the lane. And then here's a close-up view of the lead chariot, which is an Assyrian chariot, which is 25 millimeters or 30 millimeters. And there is the 20 millimeter smaller size or 1/72nd scale Assyrian chariot next to it. And one of the reasons I was able to reduce the width of this game compared to the one that I made for my granddaughter is that the smaller chariots take up less width, so that it would allow me to reduce the size of the panels. So instead of being 28 inches across, it's only 22 inches across. Now here is the game that's made for Emma. This is 22 inches wide instead of 28, and it's 44 inches long instead of 88. And so you see it's just compacted, but it's basically the same structure. You have the spine in the middle, move the Emperor's box up a little bit, house an Alba Linea, and then you see the chariot starting venue at the back there. I think 2 laps is plenty, but you can take as many laps as you want. The regular standard race was 7. And you see our pedestrians again. Before the chariots do their new turn, the pedestrians roll a dice and move themselves. They go back and forth. And then here's a closer shot of all of the chariots in the starting gate with their numbers behind them. And then here is a shot where they're coming down the straightaway, getting ready to approach the white line in the Emperor's box. Well, here's the race course again, and remember this is a stadium, so you could race horses, you could race men, you could have people simulating an Olympics, and you just simply make smaller squares for them. What I set up, which I thought would be fun for Emma, is a elephant race. So these are war elephants, and they would come down. There's no pedestrians on this. They don't want to take any chances of getting stepped on. Here's a picture of the various elephants in the starting gate. 2 Indian elephants, 2 Macedonian elephants, and 2 Carthaginian elephants. And then here's a shot of them as they're getting ready to go by the Emperor. So they were quite fun to put together. Well, after doing this particular setup, I decided that I would spice it up a little bit. So here I am sitting at the end of the table with my new creation. Now, they may notice that I have a different jacket on. That's because I was going to do this a couple of days ago and did not quite get to the part about making the video, so I ended up changing jackets. But the same shirt below, which is kind of a Caesar shirt. So there I am sitting at the corner, and here is the masterpiece. This is the same game, but I've used castle blocks to encapsulate the whole race course. So you have the big gate, and you've got the spine in the middle, which has a little swimming pool and a nice little area for the people to stand. So the race is off. They're out of the gate. They've got the pedestrians in the way. They're heading towards the Emperor. As they get closer to the Emperor, here we are as the chariots go by the Emperor. Remember, we didn't care about whether there were 2 horses or 4 horses. Everybody's supposed to be even. And then when they get into the corner, something special happened. You'll notice that they have spectators. Now, it's an odd set of spectators. Emma, when she was little, liked to play with these Fisher-Price people that I had for years and years and years for my daughters. And they've become an integral part of her play as a small child, particularly until she's been about 5. So I thought I'd take this picture showing the people that I had here in the spectator position. So that's the game itself. I talked about all the rules. I've shown you the different variations you could have. You could make this, I believe, out of Legos. It would just be a little different structure if you could get enough white Legos and things like that. I know the Lego people made this year a Colosseum. It was $549. It's 9,000 pieces. I hope you enjoyed this part of it, but now I'm going to show you some of the pieces of it and give you some prices. First thing I want to show you is this, the Toy Soldier Company. They make replicas of the Marx toys, and they also put together sets of all different types of plastic and lead figures from all over the world. But this is a recreation of the original Marx set, which was called the Ben-Hur set. And it has a little marking on it that says Roman Gladiator set. When you open the box, here's all the pieces. And then when you put it all together, you end up with a venue where you can do gladiating. They have gladiators, and these are 54 millimeters, so these are very large figures. They're easy to get a hold of. Came with 3 chariots, and then I put the little lion chariot together. And it has an emperor. As you can see, it's got an emperor's box. It has people selling food. There's all kinds of stuff that go with this. Now, I think when they sold it and I bought this, I think it ran around $150 for the whole box. So I'm not sure. But if you go to the Toy Soldier Company, and I bought some of the chariots and things from them as well, the elephants went together very, very easily. But of the 3 groups that I had, this Russian company was the best. I believe I bought it from the Toy Soldier Company anyway, but you can find it on eBay, and they come from the Ukraine, and you have to wait months. But I think it was like $12 for the 2 elephants and the other people. I chose not to put the warriors in the tops of the little castles, but very highly recommend this particular group. And the rest of the figures that I purchased for both the chariot racing and the elephant races were made by the Hat Company, which is very well respected. This Macedonian elephants there were 3 elephants in each box. I think they were $9. It also came with other figures as well. They snapped together very easily. And then I use balsa wood for bases, so you can reach out and grab them without having to touch the painted figures. Helps to make them last longer. Now the Carthaginians, which I'm not showing you a picture of, the only way you could get Carthaginian elephants is they were in a box of Carthaginian infantry, about 80 people. And it was about $14.95 for the whole pack. They didn't require anything. They were the solid elephant, and you just put the castle on top of them. In this case, they did not have a castle. They had a Macedonian spearman sitting on the top, and I just decided not to use them. Now, as far as the chariots, I'm going to start with the best and work to the worst. Again, they're all Hat. You can see Gallic chariot with the warrior queen. Excellent figures. They had a whole series of figures that went with them. The only thing I had to do was I had to take a little alteration to the queen because she's carrying a human head by its hair on the chariot. For elementary 6 or 7-year-olds, we don't need to do that. And you've got 3 chariots, and they fit together really well. The holes on the deck where you would put your driver and you put your queen and what have you, they fit. No problems at all. They were also easy to paint, and I just had to use a minimum amount of glue to keep them in position. But they were really, really wonderful, and I believe they were $9 a box, $9 or $10. Now the Assyrian chariots made by Hat, you got 3 chariots in the box. They didn't go together very well, but they were wide enough and big enough that I could glue them into place relatively easily. But as you can see, it's a larger chariot, so that helped a lot. And I think it was $12, $12.95, something like that. And our last chariot, which is the Sumerian chariots, and they should have been about as wide as those of the Assyrians, but these were very, very, very narrow. And it was difficult to put the people in the holes on the floor. The sideboards didn't have a good location to go into, so I had to do a significant amount of gluing. However, you can see that the yoke over the top of the horses fit pretty well here. The wheels were also a little troublesome. They had to be glued in place. And being smaller, they were also a little harder to paint. So of the 3, this was the one that I had the most trouble with. It also came with 3 chariots. And I think this was between $12.95 and $14. These are the paints that I used. They're from the company called Vallejo. They were excellent. They're easy to use, good quality. All of the colors that you needed to do what I wanted to do, flesh tones, gold, silver. $59.95 was the price. And that's a little more than I was hoping to pay, but in the end, I would have paid more using testers and probably not had the same variety. So they were excellent. And here's the brushes that I used, these micro detail paint brushes that I bought on Amazon. I think they were $19.95, but they could be $29.95. I don't know why I didn't keep all the records of this, but I didn't for some reason. Oh, they were wonderful. They were ergonomic, they fit in your hands, they were easy to clean. If I'd had these years ago when I painted my Napoleonic figures, it would have saved me a ton of time. And here's a picture of me painting the figures with the brushes and what have you. I am not a really good artist. They worked really well for what I'm doing here. So if you are a miniature figure painting, please excuse my lack of skill, if you will. But I had a great time doing all the painting. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope that it gave you some ideas and helped you out a little bit. I'm sorry if it went a little long. I do have a tendency to run a little long, particularly when adding all of the extra materials in. But it's time to get back on my chariot and head off to the races.